Hey everyone, in this video I want to talk about the System Center Operations Manager, SCOM, managed instance service we now have available in Azure. Many of us have been using SCOM for a really long time. It had this shining set of capabilities that really we don't see in other places. Through these management packs, it had deep knowledge and expertise in very specific solutions to give us the ability to have great insight and monitoring capabilities, and then the ability to act on those different signals that were received. Now, if I think of a traditional SCOM deployment, obviously it's made up of a number of management servers that would utilize a SQL Server database as its stateful store. I would then have various management tooling, dashboards would connect to that management server, and then for those instances we were monitoring, now this could be a Windows OS, a Linux OS, appliances, we would have the SCOM agent installed, which would either talk directly to the management server, or if maybe it was in a different domain than the management server, we needed to use cert-based authentication, well, we could deploy gateway servers, and it would talk to that, do the cert-based auth, which would then go and talk to the management server. And if we think of that set of infrastructure, we're responsible for all of those elements. So now, as the name suggests, we have a managed instance version of SCOM, which gives you an indication that, well, aspects of that set of infrastructure is shifting the management to be Azure. They're taking over a number of those things. So what I wanted to walk through is, well, what are those shifts in responsibility? I don't want to go into detail of the functionality of SCOM managed instance because it's SCOM. There's no fundamental, it's essentially exactly the same sets of functionality we have. So instead I wanted to outline, well, what are those shifts in responsibilities and what are the things that I as the customer am still responsible for? What are the things I still need to do? So this solution, just like if you've seen it, SQL MI, is running in my subscription. So I as the customer can think about, well, it's going to integrate very tightly with my virtual network. So I'm going to create my VNet. I probably have it already. I have other things running in there. Now, the first thing I'm going to deploy is a SQL managed instance. So that in itself runs in a particular subnet. Now, obviously, straight away by using SQL MI, I'm shifting some of the responsibilities I had with that stateful database to a PaaS service. SQL MI gives me great compatibility with a regular SQL server running in an OS, but I'm shifting a lot of the responsibility to the platform. Now, I'm also going to use managed identity. Managed identity is phenomenal for enabling resources to talk to other resources without me having to maintain secrets or certificates. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to create a user-assigned managed identity, which, as you would expect, we're going to give certain roles on that database. So this is stuff I am creating. Now, I'm also going to require a subnet that I'm going to create for the SCOM MI. Now, it doesn't have to be dedicated. I can have other things running in here. I need at least 32 IPs available. It cannot be trying to use the SQL MI subnet, for example. But the SCOM managed instance is going to deploy into a subnet. But again, it could cohabitate. Just make sure I have at least those 32 IPs available. Now, it's going to integrate with my virtual network. So that means I'm not worrying about service endpoints. It's not supporting private endpoints at this time. It's going to have an IP exposed within your subnet. It's also going to use things like Key Vault, because there's going to be secrets that I'm going to store in the Key Vault that will enable the authentication for the SCOM managed instance solution to my Active Directory to do the various AD integrated things it's going to require. Because yes, the SCOM MI will still integrate with your Active Directory domain services. That's still going to be a requirement. And then once again, as you would expect, that user assigned managed identity is going to have certain get and list permissions on the secrets we have in that key vault. Now, there's also things you're going to have to do in your Active Directory. You're going to have to create a computer group. You're going to create a group managed service account because that is what is going to be used for the various SCOM components. What is going to get created ultimately in this subnet is going to be a virtual machine scale set and an internal load balancer. So one of the other things you're going to be responsible for is in your DNS, you're going to have this SCOM DNS name you're going to add that's going to point to this IP. So you're going to pick, well, what is the private IP I want from this subnet? And I'm going to create a record so this, we call it IP1, in that subnet is going to resolve to that IP1. And there's very, very explicit documentation that walks through all of this stuff in great, great detail. I'm merely trying to explain what are some of the things you have to do to go and get this set up. The other thing that is required is going to create an internal load balancer behind which SCOM MI is going to sit. Because of the nature of the size of SCOM, what actually happens is I can think about, well, there's storage that has all the bits required to both install SCOM and then keep it updated, which this is going to require connectivity too. As you're probably aware, if I put services behind an internal standard load balancer, it has no just inherent internet access. So what is required is I also have to have a NAT gateway deployed, because obviously NAT gateway has one or more public IPs or scopes, contiguous IPs, and I have to link that to the subnet. So this is all stuff that I, as the customer, think of Blue as stuff I am doing. I have to get all of those things in place. Once I've done all of these things, which maybe sounds more than it really is, hey, deploy a SQL MI, create a subnet, create an identity, giving it permissions, create a NAT gateway and link it. Now I can go ahead and actually, there's some pre-scripts I'm going to run to check the environment is ready. Then it's going to go ahead and actually create the SCOM managed instance. And what it's going to do is in here, it's going to create a virtual machine scale set, which is running those management servers. So it's N number. The minimum count is 1, but I can grow based on what I require, based on number of endpoints I'm going to actually manage. And then it's going to create that standard load balancer that's going to have these as its back-end set, and this is going to be the front-end IP address. So this is how the communications are going to function. And once again, as part of this installation, when it needs to go and get the bits for the install, for the updates, it's going to go via the NAT gateway to get to this. Now, I did give feedback to the product group that it would be nice to publish explicit, fully qualified domain names that are required. For example, so I could use Azure Firewall. They've taken that and they're going to look at that post-haste. And so I would expect some changes to be coming around that. But the whole process is very well documented. If I quickly jump over for a second and show the documentation, let's go over here. It goes through huge details, you can see here on the left, of all of the different sets of steps. So everything I'm talking about, there's a whole set of instructions on how you would explicitly need to do this. So it is a very, very smooth process. Now, what's the connectivity actually required for this to work? So if I think about, this is my stuff in Azure. It is integrated with Active Directory domain services. Now I could think this could be on premises, and I've got, for example, my domain controllers, might be integrated with the AD aware DNS as well, but there has to be connectivity. Now that could be a site-to-site VPN. It could be ExpressRoute private peering. There has to be an IP path between them, and I require my VNet to use my custom DNS. i.e., when this service tries to resolve the records to find LDAP and Kerberos service records for my AD, it's going to be able to resolve. Now, I might have domain controllers in Azure. Fantastic. The same thing applies. I need an IP path, and when I do DNS lookups to find service records for AD, I have to be able to find them. So I'm going to have that in place so it can locate. But that's the requirement to actually go and get it set up. It does not integrate with Entra ID today. It's still using your Active Directory domain services. Now, obviously then from a management perspective, I have the operations console. Well, once again, the operations console just needs to be able to resolve this name and talk to that IP1. So again, it could be on premises and it can talk over site-to-site VPN ExpressRoute. Hey, maybe I'm running a desktop or a solution that's in this VNet or it's peered to this VNet. That's just going to work as we would expect. Same for the clients. If I've got my client machine, it just has the agent. The agent has to be able to resolve the name and talk to it. Site-to-site VPN, ExpressRoute, or it's running in the VNet or a peered virtual network. Nothing changes. I can use a gateway. Because once again, if this instance is not in the same domain, so I can't use the Kerberos authentication, because that's what we're going to use by default. By default, it's going to use Kerberos authentication. If I can't use that, then it's going to use certificate. Once again, hey, I can have a gateway. It can go and talk to the gateway, and then it will use cert-based. And then it's the gateway that requires that resolution. The gateway requires that connectivity to be able to talk to it. Now, I do want to point out, the way the gateway is created and managed, it uses Azure Arc. So this is the only time this OS instance has to be Arc enabled. Because the gateway is going to be fired up by a gateway extension. That's the only thing that needs to be Arc enabled. And that's that Arc enabled server OS. This is going to be powered by an Arc enabled extension. So yes, that's the only time. Remember, Arc enablement for server OS is free. This is not, hey, causing me any cost. So this is the setup, and the documentation goes through the explicit ports and all the connectivity you require. But really the key point here is, yes, I'm still responsible for, hey, the network. I'm creating the SQL MI. But in terms of responsibility, SQL MI itself is a PaaS solution. I've shifted a lot of the responsibilities. If I was really being honest, I'm not wholly responsible for this thing. This, I'm shifting a lot of it to the PaaS platform anyway. I create a subnet, I create a NAT gateway. NAT gateway is also a managed service. And then it's going to deploy the management servers. It's going to utilize those permissions. It creates a standard load balancer using the IP I specify. And then I have my SCOM managed instance up and running and ready to use. Now, what management packs can I leverage? All of them. That includes custom. Nothing is taken away in this solution. Again, the whole point of that managed instance, it gives you phenomenal compatibility and equivalency in the functionality. I'm just removing some of the management things that previously I was responsible for. Now, I'm not really responsible for the database. I'm not responsible for the management servers. I just now have this managed instance of SCOM available that I can leverage in my organization. Now, if I think about the resiliency and the scale, obviously I'm creating that SQL managed instance. I get to pick the resiliency I want, and there's guidance for the particular specifics of what I need for the database. The VM scale set, remember that's one or more virtual machines. And there's very specific guidance on this. So if we jump over, I'm looking at a SCOM managed instance. I can see the infrastructure. And right now you can see I have one. There's only one VM in this. But if I went to scaling, the way this works is I simply tell it how many endpoints do I need. So if I said 5,000, notice it recommends you need 5 management servers. At this point, it's showing me, okay, well, these are the VMs we're going to create. Obviously, I'm paying for these. And then I would hit save. When I hit save, it would go off and perform that scale out action on the virtual machine scale set. Same as if I then maybe reduce the number of endpoints, and I can override this number. I might say, no, I only want to do 4. It's giving me a warning about potential performance, but I absolutely can override it if I want. But if I was reducing, I could shrink the number and it can scale in. I can reduce the number I actually want. So this is a very, very useful capability. I will say at this point, it is not zone redundant. So those virtual machine scale sets deployments are what I would say is regional. So they'll use different fault domains, different racks, for example, but it's not spreading it over availability zones. There's no regional DR at this point. But obviously for the database, I have configurations on what I want to do with that. So there's different elements I can be responsible for. You may have seen the reporting. It integrates with Power BI. There's also Azure Managed Grafana integration. So there's a lot of different ways I can get to the reporting. It integrates with log analytics workspaces. So for the logs from the agents, I could use the Azure Monitor agent and a data collection rule to send that to a log analytics workspace. And then I can easily run queries against the various logs that before were just local to the client. Now, one of the things that's really nice, actually, let's go back to the page, is the patching. Now, you may have noticed when I first went to this, it's actually telling me, hey, there is a newer version. We're used to SCOM, and that maybe we get an update rollout every 6 months. This is going to be way more frequent, 2 to 4 weeks. So I can now go down to update, and it's a one click. It'll tell me, hey, there's an update available. I could go and look at the release notes, and I can just hit update instance to trigger that rollout to bring up that new version in my environment. Now, if we think about, for example, the management pack side of this, or how do management packs get updated? That's just following the existing solution. Right now, for example, management packs, I could leverage the operations console and I can update those. Same for the agents. I can update the agents, I can update the management packs, all through the existing SCOM mechanisms. That's just going to continue to work. The same applies to the agents and how I would roll out the agents. I use exactly the same idea of, hey, I can do the discovery. That could be network discovery. Obviously, there's integration of the Active Directory discovery. There's different ways I can go and find them and then go and push out those agents. So those existing methods, network scan as well will work. I can use that to get all of this pushed out. So it's all familiar. There's no big shifts in how I do this. What's really just changing is the bits I'm responsible for, and now it's just giving me this SCOM managed instance that I can go and leverage. From a pricing perspective, I think it's $6 per month per endpoint, but there's no on-premises data center license required. There's no SQL license, no SCOM, no Windows license. Now, obviously, I'm paying for the components. I'm paying for the SQL MI. I'm paying for the SCOM MI solution via that $6 for the endpoint. I am paying for the virtual machine scale set. I'm paying for that standard load balancer. I'm paying for that NAT gateway. So there are cost components to it, but it's also taking away a lot of the cost components. So you can go and work out, hey, what makes the most sense for me, including shifting those responsibilities over. What if you're running SCOM already? This is not a hybrid solution. This is not going to integrate with an existing SCOM you had, and I'm not aware of any plans for that. There is going to be migration tooling, so that is imminent. So if I have SCOM and now I want to be able to shift those responsibilities over, there's going to be tooling to enable me to do that. And that's it. I mean, hopefully this makes a lot of sense. The key point, and that managed instance name really gives it away, it's the SCOM you know and love, but I'm responsible for less of it. I'm not responsible for the database. I'm not responsible for the management servers. I'm going to get a faster updating service, and I can just focus instead on leveraging the functionality using the same console, the same management packs, the same discovery, the same agent updating, etc., that I currently use. We get some nice integration with the log analytics to get the alerting. Something I didn't mention, when I have alerts, it will actually send those to Azure Monitor alerts as well. So they're going to surface in the Azure Monitor. So that's a very nice integration point as well. So that's it. As always, I hope this was useful. Until next video, take care.